Yee Xiong, and welcome to the Happier Together podcast. This is episode 3, Hmong Community Needs and Resources with Dr. Yee Xiong. Please note that there will be descriptions of substance abuse, mental health, and suicide in this episode. Some listeners may find this disturbing. If you find yourself feeling triggered, the description box will include timestamps for each topic. This is to empower you, our audience, with the knowledge you need to make healthy decisions about how and if you should consume this podcast content. The experiences of war, immigration, and assimilation into American culture, navigating American society, and much more have taken a toll on the mental health of the Hmong community as a whole. Many community members go undiagnosed with mental health issues because of cultural disbelief and spiritual understandings. Health issues commonly found in Hmong immigrants include chronic disease and excessive substance abuse, which there is a lack of seeking medical attention until disease has been developed. Due to the lack of trust in Western medicine and indifferent attitude towards mental health, it is evident that mental health resources go grossly underused. There is a baseline need for education of the importance of mental health and culturally appropriate approaches to address ongoing traumas. By assessing the most common mental health concerns in the Hmong community and applying a culturally sensitive lens to address the issues, this analysis could greatly influence future implications of mental health resources and outreach. Dr. Yee Xiong will describe the current need for mental health in the Hmong community and describe the great work that Project Tshav Ntuj is doing to create change. Let's get into the episode. So Dr. Yee, if you could introduce yourself with your educational and career background, and also explain why mental health is important to you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. My name is Yee Xiong, and I'm double boarded certified in addiction psychiatry. I'm also a second generation Hmong American, and mental health is very important to me because it is something that is not well accepted or well understood for some time in the Hmong community. And so my passion in mental health comes from a personal level in which, there's curiosity, there's just a lot of personal drive to want to understand better and make a difference in the Hmong community. And then also a professional level in that, unlike a lot of medical illnesses, mental health is one that does not require invasive testing. Like, it doesn't require blood draws or eye CAT scan. Like, those are diagnostic options to rule out if needed. But mental health is something that can be diagnosed based on, the story that patients tell. And not only that, suicide is a preventable cause of illness. And if I can prevent suicide from happening, I feel like that is such a great success in the field that I work in.
My first question for you is, what are the current coping mechanisms of mental health that exist in the Hmong community? I see that you have a background in addiction and substance abuse. Is that something that's common in the Hmong community, or what have you seen in your work?
So there are a lot of coping mechanisms in the Hmong community. Some are healthier than others. I can touch on the use of substances right away, since that's what is one of your question. I think that is an unhealthy way of coping, yet it is a mechanism in the community that has been utilized over centuries from a cultural perspective. There is a lot of substance use that goes on. Whether substance use turns into abuse or use disorder, that's a separate topic, but substance use is prevalent. The use of alcohol is quite prevalent. Nicotine, tobacco use is quite prevalent. The use of illicit substances is prevalent too. I think we stand at a fork in the road where is the use now becoming a use disorder? Is it an addiction? Is it something that's problematic? And should the community address it? That part, I don't think there's a lot of data to back that up yet. But I think you and I can both attest to the frequency of the use of, let's say, alcohol in the Hmong community. We could probably attest to the incidences where we do see that it is problematic, but I think that is more individualized and it's not so much a community issue at this time like the opioid epidemic. I do see people turning to substances to self-medicate or to kind of just cope with their problems temporarily. It can first look like it's a social gathering, but then it can sometimes quickly escalate to something else. Now, in regards to coping mechanisms that exist in the community, I think there are a lot of mechanisms that have been set in place for some time now. Like, I think back to Laos and Thailand and what life was like back then. Just kind of having that routine, that day to day kind of farming, gathering lifestyle, kind of tap into the behavioral activation and kind of promoting self-care, that sense of community, doing rituals. I think that was how the community coped with symptoms of mental health back then. And even nowadays in America, that sense of routine, that sense of needing to wake up every morning to go to work, that sense of needing to provide for the family, although that can itself be a source of stress, I think that routine, that sense of, I am doing this to serve something greater than myself, my family, my community, that speaks for itself too. I think also having places of community gathering, that is also a coping mechanism, kind of gathering at, Hmong Village, Hmong Town, or the Hmong New Year, or the 4th of July International Soccer Tournament, just places of community gathering to kind of extract them from the home or whatever source of stress that they may be encountering. For the Hmong people that are still practicing shamanism, those social gathering is also a way to cope in addition to going through the rituals itself, kind of appeasing that idea of a broken spirit or a fallen spirit, kind of building a community, having a lot of Hmong run adult daycares for the elderlies to gather and to find happiness or to kind of promote that social gathering is a way that the Hmong people have kind of adapted to developing different coping mechanisms, and being a collectivistic community itself is also a way that the Hmong community continues to foster these coping mechanisms where there's a lot of rationalization when it comes to making difficult decisions so that the anxiety is taken off of the individual and the problem is attacked from a more problem focused approach. And I think that is also a way that the Hmong community has developed coping mechanisms to foster difficult situations.
You bring up a really interesting point. Initially, you're talking about how mental health was being approached more on a communal level, but from what I've seen, it seems like the first generation immigrants, they tend to look more for a community approach to alleviate coping, but it seems like the second and third generations are more withdrawn from the community. Is this a trend that you've been seeing in your work as well?
I think it's difficult to say because I think the Hmong community in general, we're a collectivist community. I think no matter where you look at, whether it's first generation, second, or third generation, but within that concept, one thing to keep in mind is that there is still a sense of individualism. There is still a sense of need for that private emotional outlet. The second and third generation is tapping into that component more, where there is a drive or a desire for more independence, a more private space to cope. And that kind of can appear to break away from the collectivist culture, but it's still a component of a collectivistic community. I think everybody can accept that mental health is prevalent in the Hmong community. The elderly generation, the first generation, they do understand that it exists, but how it exists in their mind is different from how it exists in the second and third generation. In their mind, there are people who had fled, war-torn countries and immigrated to the United States. And so their sense of what is disorder or what is problematic is different from what second and third generation Hmong people feel is such a strong burden. I think the perspective is different, and because of that difference in perspective, it's harder to understand and communicate and have either sides understand where they are coming from. So, like for instance, if a younger generation person talks about depression, sometimes the elderly generation's like, you don't know what it's like to be depressed. If I'm not depressed, I'm not depressed. Like, why should you be depressed? You don't even need to worry about fleeing from your homeland. Like, why are you depressed? You don't need to worry about raising a bunch of kids in a foreign country. Why are you depressed? And so that differences is something that I think there's a lack of appreciation from where each generation comes from, and things are often minimized. And so because of that differences, it creates this barrier in, so why should I, now being the younger generation, come to you old folks if you can't even understand where I'm coming from? Why would I seek out community healing if you guys can't understand and validate my emotions?
I can definitely relate to that feeling as a second generation Hmong person myself, that it can just be really hard to have these discussions and feel like you are being validated when you do express any concerns. And on that note, what is the current need of mental health services in the Hmong community?
There is a lot of need for mental health services. I think it starts from the simple stuff like destigmatizing mental illnesses and what that is, defining what is mental illness is. What I find to be helpful is talking about it from a disease perspective, because if you can't understand and accept that mental illnesses is a form of disease and illnesses and sickness, then how are you going to accept that there is treatment for it? And so it starts at basic destigmatizing mental illnesses, talking about it, normalizing the conversation about it so that we can start um, utilizing the services that are available. Like there are Hmong Rong mental health clinics. There are Hmong providers, but if you can't accept that this is a disease, then why would you seek out treatment, right? And so I think it starts with destigmatizing, and then it starts with continuing with these culturally sensitive mental health services, promoting Hmong students to continue to pursue careers in the healthcare field, or encouraging them to continue learning about mental illnesses and continue this conversation that this is a disease condition and it's treatable and there are treatment services for it.
Most definitely. And I feel like it's really hard to find that balance between understanding that mental health is an actual disease because it's so abstract to conceptualize. In your work, are you finding that it's more acceptable to discuss this openly?
I think it is becoming more acceptable because people are more open to talk about it using social media and things like that. But yet, at the same time, there are still groups of people who are in complete denial. There's a group of people who mental health has personally affected them or affected people close to them. And so they've come to an acceptance. And then there's this group of people who are still in complete denial. And as soon as we drop the word mental illness or suicide, they walk away, they don't show up, they disengage. And so there is still this gap in the community.
Earlier, you mentioned that there are some Hmong organizations and programs that exist to serve the community. And in your opinion, how can these programs be measured to be culturally appropriate for the Hmong community? So when we think about these programs that people would want to be engaged in, what are the values that need to be upheld in order to get that community buy-in and trust?
I would like to think that if there's good retention, if the patients that you're serving keeps coming back, then you're doing something right. And if they're not coming back, then there's something that you're missing. But yet, at the same time, in my experience as a prescriber of medicine, oftentimes if people are better, they stop coming, which is not the evidence-based guideline to treating mental health symptoms. We would like to follow through even when things are going well to ensure that yes, things are going well because this medication's working, and encouraging them to continue to take it as opposed to tapering off when things are going well. And so I think there's not a lot of good measures out there to measure what these specific or different clinics are doing is meeting the standards of the community, but I'd like to think that if patients keep coming back, it's serving them in some form.
Earlier, you were mentioning that mental health isn't like physical health, right? So, in physical health, when someone has an injury, they go to the doctor, they seek treatment, and then they're good to go. But you were saying that mental health is something that needs to be continuously monitored, regardless of if they're symptomatic, because it's an ever flowing illness. So, how do you balance retention to monitor symptoms while also respecting the boundaries if the patient doesn't feel like they need treatment?
There are a set of symptoms that we look at when somebody is struggling with mental illnesses. And the biggest thing is it so severe that it's impacting function in their day to day functioning, to go to school, to go to work, to maintain relationships? And so when symptoms are severe enough that that ability to function becomes impaired, then that's when we need to explore, what's going on. What is the mental illness that's driving these symptoms to be this severe? But if you're still functioning and if your symptoms are not impairing your ability to carry your day to day activities, then it's important to continue to monitor those and do self check ins to troubleshoot if things are getting more difficult to work with, or if things are getting better, to do your own self reflection and assessment to see, hey, what is making me feel happy? What is working? and I should then continue those that is working for me. So there should be, personal inventory every so often. And it's not something that people do regularly. Like you don't think about what's going well until things don't go well and then the world starts crashing on you and then you realize that things are not going well. But I think it's something that, we should all engage in to just take some moments in our day-to-day life to kind of think about, the positive and negatives and continue working on the positive because things that naturally makes us feel happy is going to naturally continue to make us feel happy, and things that makes us miserable, well, it's within our power to work on changing those so that we don't need to maintain the misery that we live in. And if it's too much that we can't change, then maybe that's when you seek out professional help.
Yeah, and I see that you have extensive engagement with mental health, not only on a local and regional level, but also a national level. And I found a really interesting project that you're engaged in, which is Project Tshav Ntuj. Can you explain what that organization is, how it began, and what the core mission and values are?
Project Chandu is now a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but it came about back in 2019 when a Hmong student in the Minneapolis school district died by suicide, and his parents reached out to his teacher and wanted to do something in memory of his death. And his teacher is somebody who's well connected in the Hmong community, so she brought a bunch of Hmong community members together, including myself, and we got together and we're like, hey, you know what? This is a bigger issue than just that one death by suicide, and we want to do something bigger than that. After a series of meetings, that's how Project Chandu came about. We came about with the mission to prevent suicide in the Hmong community and to promote help seeking behaviors so that we can really start destigmatizing and start the conversation regarding mental illnesses, regarding suicide, and promoting help seeking behaviors. And so we've done all sorts of things in the community to kind of promote that hope, whether it's using art and music to promote that discussion regarding, mental health and mental illnesses, or doing 5K walk and runs to promote family gathering, to promote that sense of community that no, you are not alone. Other people also struggle with mental illnesses. And although things may feel tough and hopeless at times, there is hope at the end of the day. We've also done QPR, so question, persuade, refer suicide training to train the community to be gatekeepers to start these conversations when their loved ones are expressing signs and symptoms of suicide. And so we've been busy with Project Chandu in preventing suicide in the Hmong community.
When I first heard about the project, I was just so impressed with how much has been done, not only on a professional, but also a community level, which is just astounding. And from the events that you've had so far and the things that your organization has been doing, what has the community response been? Has there been adequate engagement?
I think with the use of music, we've opened up a gateway to help normalize the conversation, or even when people are not there to want to directly learn about mental illnesses, they're there to listen to the artist who then promotes our message. And at the end of the day, it's the message that we want to get carried across. Sometimes parents don't want to talk about it, and having the kids encourage the parents to come for the artistic expression has been what's helpful. Sometimes the kids don't want to talk about it, and using these artists, these people who they might idolize, to encourage these conversations have been helpful. And so, again, I feel like a lot of people are open to learning about mental illnesses, open to destigmatizing actions towards these conversations, but yet at the same time, the people that don't show up are the people that needs it most, and are the people that are still in denial of, mental illnesses existing within their own household or in the community.
Definitely. And so, for the people that aren't comfortable showing up to these events in person, what are some other ways that people can get involved to support mental health?
I think just checking in with yourself and checking in with each other. And so, mental illnesses is so prevalent in our community. Some people are more open to sharing their own struggles and other people are not, and that's okay. But the biggest thing that you can do is, engage in self-care behaviors, like making sure you're eating healthy, you're sleeping, and also making sure that your loved ones are doing well. That's the biggest thing that you can do. And now, if you want to kind of take it a extra step further, you can kind of learn about signs and symptoms of suicide and become a gatekeeper as well in your own social network to help address suicide when somebody is struggling with suicidal thoughts. And so there are different trainings and workshops available. We run QPR, but there are other trainings and workshops available as well in the community. But yeah, I think just checking with yourself and checking with your loved ones are already a huge step, because it's something, mental illness and mental health is something that we don't talk about already. And for you to start that, it's already such a huge step in the right direction.
I appreciate just having options available for people that aren't as comfortable being so forthright with that, because I think there are a lot of people that support the movement but just don't know how to engage with it in a way that is comfortable for them. And so my last question for you is, how can the Hmong community focus on becoming happier together?
It is hard to make a community happier, but that doesn't mean we can't start taking steps towards creating a more positive and safe space. That can include accepting that mental health is a thing and that mental illnesses and mental health disorders is a thing, and then kind of reframing our understanding, reframing the conversation regarding destigmatizing words and behaviors, and striving to improve those conversations and improve help seeking behaviors as opposed to talking or advocating against help seeking behaviors. It also includes providing family support to those who are struggling and also providing family support to those who are not struggling, continuing to foster religion and spirituality, whatever they may believe in and what they feel grounds themselves, avoiding detachment, avoiding isolation in the community, and also at the same time, allowing individuals to engage in those private emotional outlets. So at the individual level, people can have that privacy that they feel they need, but at a community level, there's acceptance of the struggles and validation.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Yee, for highlighting the current assessment in the Hmong community in terms of mental health needs. It was also great to learn more about Project Tshav Ntuj and how it gets the community together to discuss such important topics. This just demonstrates how the Hmong community can really band together to find a middle ground to understand the current state of the community. And I want to thank you for your expertise throughout this episode. In the description, I've linked some of Dr. Yee's social information and how you can reach out to her and learn more about what she's doing. Thank you all for listening to this podcast, and I hope that we can continue to becoming happier together.